Hello, welcome to 3 Lanes number 64. Today we're talking about the Minolta XG-M. And I'm trying to make this one a short episode, not because I don't think this is relevant, but as you can hear, I am sick and it's hard to talk, man. But yeah, let's get it going. This episode is dedicated to Christian. He recently got this Minolta XG-M, and I saw it. I didn't know anything about the camera. I know it's a 35 millimeter SLR single lens reflex. It's a film camera, and he's using it to start shooting film. Uh, I let Christian borrow the 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 Pentax ME Super that I have. Uh, I told him that it was until we met again he would have to give it back. That was kind of joking, but I think he took it to heart, and no, he got his new one, his new baby. Well, it's always cool to get something new for yourself that you don't have to like baby too much if it's not yours. Sometimes I feel like that, like if somebody lets me borrow something, I have to be extra careful because obviously you don't want to return it damaged or anything like that. So in that sense, I do understand if that's the case. If not, he'll let me know. But this camera was introduced in October 1981 by Minolta Camera, and it was marketed in Japan as the XC70. But it didn't arrive until 1982 in the domestic market, uh, Japanese domestic market. It was the flagship of Minolta's XG series of consumer-grade manual focus SLRs, and it was directly replacing the XG9. This XG9 was released in 1979. The M in its name stands for motor drive, which highlights the capability for this camera to mount the motor drive 1 accessory for exposures up to 3.5 frames per second. So this is a significant step up on the Minolta lineup. One of the things that I want to clarify is I am not really well versed on Minolta's cameras, so let's take this Minolta XG-M as a starting point, and we'll expand our tree of Minolta cameras from here. Just like we have done with Mamiya, we have done it with Pentax, hopefully with Canon, Fuji, and we can visit all the interesting models that we can find along the way. So the XG series began again in 1977 with the XG7, and it was designed to bring automatic exposure photography to consumers, at a lower price point than the Minolta Premium XD series. And it was offering more modern features than the aging mechanical SRT line that they had. The series reflected advances in the electronics, which was the norm at that point, and miniaturization. It delivered a much smaller body, and it was smaller than previous Minolta's SLRs, which became very popular in the market. So what really triggered the development of this camera? The XGM was developed, one, because the intense competitive pressure that Minolta was feeling in the late 70s and early 80s, where this was a period of high competition among the big five. And it was these are the Japanese SLR makers like Canon, Nikon, Minolta, Pentax, and Olympus. Again, Canon, Nikon, Minolta, Pentax, and Olympus, 5. The Canon AE1, launched in 1976, was a huge hit. It was a mass market hit for Canon, and it used ICs, or integrated circuits, uh, and aggressive marketing, including the famous "So Advanced It Is Simple" campaign that they had. And by the early 1980s, Canon had roughly a third of the SLR market. Minolta, usually behind or in third place behind Canon and Nikon, needed something to appeal for the consumer grade consumers. Not so much the professional, but the average Joe, the enthusiast. So they decided to go with this XGM. There was also market saturation, and the SLR sales had peaked. The SLR production peaked around 1981 and began to decline very seriously around that time. And Minolta needed something to refresh their offerings and grab whatever demand remained from that market, which made them create the XGM. There was demand for motor drive capabilities at very lower price points, and this is why they developed this. Also, why they developed this camera. Professional and higher end cameras already offer motor drives, but consumer grade bodies they didn't. So the XGM was explicitly made to accept the faster motor drive one. This was a feature designed to attract the enthusiasts, the amateurs looking for an upgrade path without having to go to the pro level in pricing, right? One of the things, it was metering limitations of the XG9. That was another trigger to create the XGM. The XG9 meter switch off in manual mode. What a downer. Uh, it was a frustrating limitation for, I'm assuming, everybody that used it, and somebody that wanted to learn to work manually. You couldn't, because you didn't have the use of the built-in meter of the camera. So the XGM fixed this by keeping the metering display active in manual mode, making it far more practical tool for somebody that was advancing in the ranks of photography. Also, there was a corporate rebranding from Minolta. The XGM was the first camera to carry Minolta's new logo, the uppercase Minolta, with a stylized rising sun O. This was adopted in 1981 as part of the broader corporate redefinition that they had. And the new body design also, that by the way, feature a right-hand grip, relocated controls, and an updated prism cover. This body became the standard Minolta manual focus SLR body used in the X700 and the X570 and the rest of the models after that. So just to give you a brief idea, some of the key features and specifications. The format, we know it's 35 millimeters. Lens mount is the Minolta SR bayonet, MD and MC compatible. Exposure modes, you have aperture priority auto and meter manual. You have shutter, which is a horizontal cloth focal plane from 1 second to 1,000th. Oh, 1,000th. Yeah, I'm getting stuck, man. 1/1,000 of a second. But that's, and also you can add the bulb to that. But metering, you have a center weight average, ISO range from 25 to 1,600. The viewfinder covers 93% of the area. Let's see, flash sync to 1/60th of a second with a hot shoe, and a PC sync in case you need either or. By the way, PC sync is the cable that you connect from the flash to the camera and vice versa. It's like a circular plug if you're not familiar with it. And the hot shoe, obviously, it's the flash that you attach on top and it communicates with the camera directly. Exposure compensation, plus or minus 2 EV in half a stop increments. You have the weight of the camera, it's around 515 to 531 grams, the body only, by the way. Motor drive, this one is the specific feature that gave the name to the camera. Some of the challenges faced by the XGM are the Canon AE1, the Canon AE1 program. Those were huge cameras for Canon, and these were marketing driven, dominant of the SLR consumer market. It was very difficult to counter. Canon outspent virtually all competitors on advertising and had established the AE1 as the default recommendation for first-time SLR buyers. Minolta was respected for engineering. they lacked Canon's marketing muscle. Uh, the internal cannibalization with the X700, this one is painful because they had they released the X700 the same month, October 1981, and they offered program auto exposure and TTL flash metering with this camera, something that the XG-M did not have. And at a street price of only $34 more, or $223 versus $189 in 1982. The X700 became bigger than the XG-M and went on to dominate the consumer SLR market in the early 1980s. The XG-M was effectively squeezed from above by the X700 and from below by the budget XG1 at 139. So it was a tough spot to have. I mean, I guess the positioning of the products was not appropriate, or it was not very thoughtful from Minolta. We have capacitor reliability failures, and maybe the XGM's most enduring challenge is one that became worse with time. Uh, Minolta used inexpensive electrolytic capacitors across its X series. And after around 1,000 hours of power use, or simply after decades of aging, these capacitors leaked electrolyte, corroded the circuit boards, and caused shutter lockup, meter failure, or total camera death. This issue is now widespread among surviving SGM units, while the fix is straightforward with basic soldering skills. Still, it has damaged the camera's reputation on the used market. And I believe, if I'm correct, if I understand this component correctly, this ECAPs or electrolytic capacitors, even if you find something that is new old stock from this Minolta XG-M, it might be not usable because these capacitors dry out. So instead of leaking, it might dry out and it might not work, which is amazing. But that's the price that you pay for using cheap components, I guess. I don't know if at the time it was the best option or the only option. Those things are stuff that I don't have information of at the moment. But there was also a collapsing SLR market. Again, SLR sales had peaked in 1981 and fell 25% by 1985. What a blessed year, 1985. But the year Minolta itself disrupted the market with the autofocus Maxim 7000, the shift to autofocus essentially made every manual focus SLR, including the XG-M, obsolete almost overnight. There was a brand perception gap. Minolta was never seen as strong as Nikon, the professional standard, or Canon, the mass market king. And even though they had excellent optics, Minolta was one of the few manufacturers to shape their own optical glass. The brand always struggled with perennial third place identity. What is the relevance of this camera in the photography world? That's something that I always ask. It's always interesting to analyze products. Sometimes we don't think those are going to be relevant or they're not going to have a legacy. But at least most of these film cameras do, which is something I find interesting. The XGM is not the exception, and the XGM has a modest but meaningful place in the photography history. So the design became the template for Minolta's golden era. So the body style introduced with the XGM became Minolta's standard manual focus SLR, used through the X700 and the X570 and the X370 series. These cameras carried Minolta through the final years of the manual focus era. There was also an ideal learning camera. This was an ideal learning camera, sorry. But multiple generations of photographers credit the XGM as their first real camera. So just because you have it doesn't mean... No, let me take that back. When you have this camera and you think by everything that I've told you that it's bad, no, it's not. A lot of people still regard this as the real camera, which means a lot. A lot of people learn with this camera, and just because you learn like with the AE1 doesn't mean that's a bad camera. A lot of people, I'm not gonna say idolize these cameras, but they uh they have him in high regard. And this Minolta is not any different. And he was part of that. Think of it almost like the quartz era or the transition era of the cameras. So when you have this camera on your hand, think of it as a piece of history, and how you're holding part of that history from the 80s, late 70s, where the camera will transition. That's how I see it, and I think it's really cool. Uh, the combination of aperture priority auto for beginners and meter manual mode for learning had a perfect balance for learning. As one photographer uh, has noted, it was just manual enough, for you to learn. So he had to learn about aperture and shutter speed. And this comes from the journal of R. Simmons. If you type journal.R. Simmons, he has his thoughts on that. Maybe I'll leave the link on the show notes so you can read it. But and during film photography revival role in the analog photography revival of the 2020s, the XGM has become a popular and affordable entry point. Like Christian right now. Christian has this camera. It was not expensive. It's still a good camera. What else do you want? I've seen some of the photos that he's taken. The glass looks sharp enough. Looks really, really sharp. I have no complaints about the quality of the photos that the glass gives him. But the working bodies with a 50 millimeter lens can be found for around 100 to 220 on the used market. And Minolta's extensive lens ecosystem, the MD and MC lenses, they're regarded highly. The excellent value. So if you can, maybe make your own collection of MD and MC lenses and then transition to a better body, because the body at the end of the day, just so you can get away from that ECAP issue, the body at the end of the day is not what matters with a film. It's what matters is the lens. And I think if the lenses are this valuable, I think you have a good choice on your hands. Gateway to the Minolta system, the XG-M, use the Minolta SR bayonet mount, again, like what we're saying. This gives access to virtually every manual focus Minolta lens produced from 1958 and on. 1958 to like the 80s, right? So one of the most comprehensive photography systems ever created is this one. We've been discussing the product, but what about the price, right? The price of the XGM, I briefly touched on it, but the XGM was priced as a mid-range consumer SLR. It was not pro, it was not the bottom, but strategically positioned between budget and semi-pro models. So the model, meaning Minolta XG-1 or XG1, was $139 body only in 1982. The Minolta XG-M was 189, which is $50 more. And with kit lenses and all that stuff, it could vary between 250 to 290. The Minolta X700, the one that cannibalized the XGM, was 223, so it was not a huge difference. So let's say from 190 to 223, like $30, right? And with the 50 millimeter f2 lens was 240 to $300. So either $10 less or $10 more for the kit. I mean, Minolta, what are you doing? What did you do? But finally, we have the Minolta XD11. That one was $299.90. So let's call it what it is, $300. Then we have the place of distribution. We can, like all the other cameras that we have analyzed here, it's obviously authorized camera retailers like B&H in the US, uh, and other camera stores. Back then I was not around that time, so I won't be able to tell you. But there was a geographic market segmentation. The camera was marketed as the XG-M, like we said, worldwide except in Japan, where it was sold as the X70. And this started in 1982, January 1982. And it was a deliberate strategy as Minolta routinely used different model names in different markets, kind of like what we see with cars today. We have a system sales approach. Retailers could sell the XGM as a gateway to the broader Minolta system. Motor drives, auto winders, data bags, flash units, and over 50 MD to MC lenses. This encourage repeat accessory purchases. Today's channels, as you can see, we have eBay, right? Most common one might be uh, Etsy sells a bunch of stuff now. Camera Store with a K. I think they're in like Finland, maybe. Relics Film Lab, KH, you name it, right? All those stores have them. So if you're looking for one, you can find them there. Promotion, the usual promotion that they had back then, print advertising, celebrity endorsements. Minolta had previously used Olympic athlete Bruce Jenner to promote the XG1 in television commercials in 1980, establishing the XG brand's public visibility before the XGM launch. So it was not exactly the XGM, but the XG1 was promoted by Bruce Jenner. System selling. They had brochures and advertising. They also have a feature focused message, like the ads highlighted touch switch metering, electromagnetic shutter release, motor drive capabilities. The modern promotion, it's not really that Minolta is promoting this anymore. It's more so word of mouth. We have blogs, YouTube, podcasts. We have Reddit. We have communities, etc., etc., etc. So that's how you get the promotion. That's what I have for today. 22 minutes, man. I'm already too long. Uh, thanks again. If you didn't listen at 1.25 or 1.3, you should have. Now you know for next time. I'll keep being sick this week. Thanks again for your time. I will see you next time.